The air hung heavy, not just with humidity, but with the palpable scent of fear and the distant, grinding certainty of the sea. I remember the metallic shriek of the bus brakes, an abrupt, jarring stop in the absolute darkness, and the slam of the door. That sound, for me, remains the definitive opening chord of the long, terrifying opera that is war. I stood back in the shadows, an observer they did not see, watching the boys spill out, blinking into the sudden, brutal glare of the overhead lights, their civilian soft edges still clinging to them like damp cloth. That night I wasn't just observing a receiving station. I was watching the forge where mere men were to be hammered into something else entirely, a singular entity capable of surviving the absolute worst of what I knew the world would soon offer them. I watched their faces contort as the first voice hit them, a voice that wasn't spoken but commanded a sonic weapon, calibrated to strip away every layer of comfort, every trace of self-pity, every vestige of a name they had carried since birth. That voice belonged to a man, a drill instructor. But I knew his true identity was far more abstract. He was the living embodiment of the pressure, the psychological solvent designed to dissolve the ego. He didn't care about their dreams, their degrees, or their mother's final goodbyes. His only concern, the only metric I saw him apply, was whether they possessed an irreducible, non-negotiable core of will that could be shaped. I watched the fear in their eyes rapidly mutate into a state of frozen shock, the kind of stillness that precedes a seismic event. The moment they realized they were no longer individuals, but property not owned by a nation, but claimed by the lineage of pain and honor that defines the cause. For the first few weeks, I felt the cold that they felt, an omnipresent, marrow-deep chill that had nothing to do with the temperature and everything to do with perpetual exhaustion. I saw the geometry of their lives reduced to a straight line: move, obey, stand, run, and suffer. Every moment was a lesson in urgency and deficiency. Their bodies were alien to them, pushed past limits they had learned in comfortable gyms and suburban streets, now crawling through mud that tasted of rot and regret, carrying weights that felt like the crushing burden of their own impending failure. I watched as the individual names vanished, replaced by the collective shame of the platoon, the recruit tag becoming an epithet. It was psychological starvation, a systematic dismantling where a misstep or a misplaced sock became a philosophical crisis, because the DI realized, was teaching them that in true combat, the small error is the father of the grand tragedy. The rifle was the key, the axis around which their existence rotated. I saw it introduced not as a weapon, but as an extension of their own nervous system, an inanimate object imbued with sacred responsibility. "This is your life," the voice would snarl, and I saw their tentative, clumsy hands wrap around the cold metal. They were taught to sleep with it, clean it with obsessive, almost ritualistic fervor, and treat its mechanism with a reverence bordering on religious devotion. For me, that rifle became the symbol of their transformation. It was the physical anchor to their new identity, the promise of violence, yes, but more importantly, the covenant of mutual defense. I watched them transition from viewing it as a tool of death to recognizing it as the ultimate instrument of their survival and the survival of the man fighting alongside them. The individual soldier, I knew, can break, but the man who defends his weapon and his brother becomes unbreakable. The process was less about strength and more about the cultivation of a specific, deliberate resilience, the ability to function after the breaking point. I saw moments of genuine, desperate collapse, a boy weeping silently into a pillow, another doubled over in the darkness from a cramp that felt like a knife, that exhaustion so deep it stole their dreams and replaced them with the constant high-pitched hum of anxiety. But what gripped my attention was the response. The D didn't tolerate pity, because pity, I understood, is a luxury the battlefield does not afford. Instead, he forced the man next to the fallen to pick him up, not out of kindness, but out of necessity. You need him to carry your burden tomorrow. The sheer brutal genius of the training lay in this forced codependency, the creation of a primal pack dynamic where the failure of one became the failure of all, etching the concept of unit cohesion not into their minds, but into the very sinew of their tired bodies. Weeks bled into months, the harsh landscape of the training facility becoming the only reality they had ever known. I witnessed the subtle, profound shift in their eyes. The soft confusion was replaced by a hard, clear focus. The aimless shuffle of the civilian had been hammered into the deliberate, economical stride of the professional. Their movements were coordinated, their commands crisp, not because they feared the punishment, but because they had begun to internalize the terrifying truth of efficiency. They learned to crave the simplicity of order amidst the manufactured chaos, finding a deep, almost spiritual comfort in the rhythm of the march, the synchronized pull of the oars, the collective exhale after a 30-mile hike under the crushing sun. I saw them, one afternoon, instinctively form a circle to defend a seemingly meaningless objective during a simulation, and it was no longer individuals I was watching. It was a single, fluid organism, honed and dangerous. The final test, the culminating moment I always watched with a profound sense of awe and dread, was not a celebration of their power, but a final, absolute confirmation of their acceptance of pain. The Crucible. They entered it as recruits, but I knew, watching them disappear into the early morning fog, that they would only emerge as Marines. It was a 54-hour gauntlet, a deliberate psychological and physical assault that required them to subsist on little sleep and less food while navigating extreme obstacles designed to force not just fatigue, but ethical and tactical failure. I watched them in the simulated combat, their faces smeared with camouflage paint and fatigue, carrying heavy logs up impossible inclines, not for themselves, but for the man whose shoulders were already bleeding from the weight. This was the dark, necessary poetry of the training, forcing them to fail alone so they could learn to succeed together. I stood waiting as they came over the final hill, utterly spent, their uniforms ripped, their voices hoarse, but their spines impossibly straight. They were mud-caked, bruised and silent, and I saw a look in their eyes that I can only describe as the serene exhaustion of having seen the absolute worst of themselves and choosing to push past it. The transformation was complete. The civilian had been stripped away by the DE only to be resurrected by the collective will of the platoon. They stood before me, newly christened, wearing the uniform with a weight and dignity that seemed to instantly age them a decade. They had not been made into killers. I understood that crucial distinction. They had been forged into endurers, men who had stared into the mirror of absolute self-doubt and found the strength to keep marching for the sake of the person to their left and the person to their right. The ceremony was a blur of brass and music, a final, beautiful formality, but the true moment for me was afterward, when the ranks were dismissed. I watched them, no longer recruits, but Marines, turn and face the future. The silence in that moment was staggering, the quiet echo of the months of relentless screaming. I looked into the eyes of the young men who had arrived months ago, now hardened, serious, capable, and I saw not arrogance, but an unnerving, brutal clarity. They now possessed a terrible knowledge. They knew what they were capable of, and they knew precisely what they had been made ready for. They were the finest product of our violent history, forged in the brutal, beautiful, necessary crucible of training. And I stood there, watching them walk away, knowing that the training was not about learning how to fight. It was about learning how to be the final, necessary shield against the chaos of the world. They were ready. That was all that mattered.